It's almost that time. The NFL Combine is around the corner. So what matters and what doesn't?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Combine is almost here, and some people don't care. And if you don't care, look, skip ahead like 9 minutes and we'll talk about something else. But it is important, if for no other reason, than the Packers have made it crystal. I mean, Waterford high-end crystal clear that they care about the Combine, that they care about athletic profiles. I don't want to relitigate the should they care more about production versus the... I don't want to do that because, number one, we've done it. And number two, it doesn't matter because we know what the Packers think. It matters to them when it comes to top 100 picks especially. And there are certain positions where they care about athletic profiles more than others, where they care more about their size thresholds than others. And I don't even want to do like chapter and verse repeat all of that because I think a lot of you already know it. That will not be fun. But as we head toward the Combine, I think it's important that I do this every year. I mean, this is, how many years have I been doing this? Since 2017. We talk about this every year, about what matters and what doesn't. I want to zone in here, though, on the positions that the Packers are going to be looking at. It's not just the times that matter. Let's take cornerback, for example. The Packers have not drafted a corner that weighed less than 190 pounds since Terrell Buckley in 1992. They drafted Demarius Randall. He was 189. He was a safety in college, and they drafted him, and we found this out after the fact. They kind of admitted, yeah, we drafted him to be a sort of safety nickel hybrid player. They played him at corner because they needed him at corner, and he played well enough that they just kept him there. But the plan originally was for his role to be slot safety hybrid. They've been a little weird with safety. They do not have the sort of strict, it seems, structure on what they're looking for at safety. They're probably not going to draft a safety early in this draft, so we don't have to think or worry about that. They also really prefer you be at least 5'11". Jair was 5'10" and change. I think he was 5'10.6". So closer to 5'11" than 5'10", but still not 5'11". Why does this matter? Well, the Packers have always believed in size at corner. Whether you agree or not is irrelevant. They believe in, and frankly, I think you can make the case that if you look at their draft history going back to 1992, that they might consider a change because there have been plenty of misses in there as well in the top 100. And I'm not talking about just Eric Stokes, who I think was more injury related than anything. You go back and you look at, Ahmad Carroll, who was lighter. Antoine Edwards, who was a big dude, Joey Thomas. There's plenty of Pat Lee, plenty of examples where it has not worked out for they've taken the big corner and they can't play. Now Mike McKenzie, he fits the bill. Josh Jackson, I didn't even mention Josh Jackson. So we'll see if any of that changes. Jeff Hafley coming in can and might change the equation. I mentioned this when they brought in Joe Barry. When Ted Thompson had Dom Capers and they wanted to play a little bit of a different style, he drafted some smaller players. He drafted, someone like Jarrell Worthy, who they might not have. And by the way, if you look at some of those moves, like maybe they should not have done that. It seems clear that when Mike Pettin came, they wanted big edge players. Rashawn Gary, 6'5", 270. Now, Lucas Van Ness was Joe Barry, but 6'5", 270. I mean, these are big. They signed Zadarius Smith, 6'5", 275. Preston Smith, 6'5", 265. Big dudes. This structure, this system has worked with some smaller edge players in the past. Could the Packers be doing that in this class? Maybe. There are some really good players at the top, like someone like James Pierce Jr., who's 6'4". We'll see what he comes in at. 6'4", 6'5", but 245, 248. Now he's got the frame. Could he add some weight? Does he keep the burst and some of the explosiveness? I don't know. The Packers generally want their edge guys to be premier athletes. In the case of edge rushers, what does that mean? Because it's not just 40-yard dash. There's 3 numbers traditionally that are important for pass rushers. 10-yard split. Way more than 40-yard dash. 10-yard split. Because it's about how fast you get out of the blocks. What is your get off? How fast are you taking those first 3 steps? It is an intuitive part of the process. Yes, you can see it on tape, but to be able to see it on the field, you go, well, they can practice for that. Yeah, well, if they practice for that, it will help them get out of their stance, you would think, on the football field too. It's one of those rare things where like training for the Underwear Olympics can actually help you on the field. Broad jump, because it measures that same sort of explosiveness, what is in your lower half. And then I think the underrated one is the 3-cone. We went through last week about the cohort of guys who had the 10+ broad and the sub 7 3-cone. It is a very sexy list. And it is not the most common thing to be that explosive vertically or linearly and also be able to bend. That's the thing, is guys who can actually turn the corner, who can change directions. Can you hit, even if you don't show the inside move on tape, do you have that change of direction ability that could allow you to develop that move at the next level? Some players just like flat out don't have the lateral agility to be able to put that in their bag. They just don't have it. And some guys, they don't have the ankle flexion and body bend to dip and bend the edge, to turn the corner. They just don't have the ability to do that. Some of that stuff you can see in a 3-cone drill. The Packers have some players on their roster who at 270 ran faster 3-cones than some of the receivers on their team. Now they like the 3-cone for receivers too. And we'll kind of put a button on this there. If you want to play receiver for the Green Bay Packers, 6 feet tall, 190, 195, sub 4.6 40, Dontavian Wicks 4.61, sub 7 3-cone, right at that 7, even 7.1 you might be able to sneak in. And you go, well, that's got to be pretty easy. And that guy, if they're just like bang on 6 foot, 195, they run 4.55 and run a 6.99 3-cone, like they're going to have like a 6 relative athletic score, a 7 relative athletic score. But guess what? There aren't that many guys who check all of those specific boxes, who are that big, that thick. The density at receiver matters to the Packers. They want you to, like, even Amari Rodgers, who was short, they talked about the density. He was a bigger guy despite being 5'9", 5'10", probably 5'9", 5'8". They care about density at both corner and receiver. Frankly, all of their positions, they care about that because it should theoretically translate to, can they break tackles? Can they hold up to the physicality of the NFL game? Are they going to translate that way? That's just something that they've cared about for a long, long time. So those are some things at some key positions for the Packers to keep an eye on that matter, not just to the Packers, but in general, as we get you toward the combine. Now, the first round gets a lot of attention. We spend way too much time talking about it. So let's talk about that next on Locked On Packers. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when I win, guess what? I get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. There's a lot of annoyance with the Packers on Packers Twitter and social media and callers to radio stations and commenters on articles and all that stuff about the allocation of resources, about the first round picks in particular. Brian Gutekunst not been as deft in the first round as Packer fans would like. And I understand that premise. But it doesn't, this is very much to me like, well, they haven't taken a receiver in the first round since whenever. This team is the best day two receiver drafting team of the last 30 years. So who cares? Now, what you'll say is, if you're cynical or you just fall on this side of the argument, is you'll say, well, what if they hit on their first round pick and they found those players later in the draft? I'm going to say something I'm not allowed to say from a lot of people, and that is a lot of this really is just luck. And if you're doing your scouting effectively and you're trading down and you're taking a lot of shots on goal, eventually you will hit, you will score. Finding, like Zach Tom is the guy that I go back to over and over and over. Will Anderson just told our pal Kevin Clark at ESPN that Zach Tom is the best offensive lineman he's gone against. He goes against Laramie Tunsil every day in practice and said Zach Tom reminds him of Laramie Tunsil. Zach Tom, a day 3 pick. It doesn't matter where you find them. I saw this graphic. Let's assume the graphic is right. It seems right. It's each team's first and second round picks that are starters on the team that drafted them. The Packers are 25th, 54% of their first and second round picks are starters. Now, it's not 54% of their starters are first and second round picks. No. Now, on that list, below them, so fewer, the Rams, playoff team, division winner. The 49ers has nothing to do with the number of first-round picks that are starting for them. They got injuries, just crushed them last year. The Vikings, 40%. They just won 14 games. And the Commanders are last, the fewest in the NFL. They were in the NFC Championship game. You want to know who's number one? The Chicago Bears. 91% of their first and second round picks are starters. Now, look, second is the Eagles, but third is the Saints. So what does this really tell us? Assuming these numbers are right. Like there are plenty of teams on this list where, playoff teams, Chargers, Bucks, Steelers, Texans, Ravens, they're all ahead of the Packers, the Bills, the Lions. Lions are like marginally ahead of the Packers. But like so are the Patriots and they stink. So are the Titans. They stink. So are the Browns. They stink. The Chiefs just ahead of the Packers. The Jets, the Cardinals ahead of the Packers. Yes, it would be better for the Packers if Jordan Morgan had been able to come in right away and be awesome. One of the big reasons the Eagles won the Super Bowl is that Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean came in right away, and were great. There's no question that that's true. But starting, first of all, is a bad proxy for this because, like, how many teams that are bad use their picks and someone's got to come in and has to start for them right away? Like, I will repeat what I have said over and over and over and will continue to say over and over and over. Most rookies are bad. Relying on them is generally not what you prefer to do. It's why the Packers are actually generally patient with these guys. They draft them with an eye for next year. Because in year one, they're generally not going to be able to help you. It's why they don't really care if they're going to play in year one. It's why they will draft Jordan Love. It's why they will draft Rashawn Gary. It's why they will draft Jordan Morgan, who I do think is going to be a very good player in this league. They didn't need Jordan Morgan to come in right away for them, but they didn't know what Rasheed Walker was going to be. They didn't know Sean Ryan was going to establish himself. That happened, but they didn't have that information on draft day. How is the urgency piece of this going to manifest itself for the Packers? I don't know. But if you go back and you look at the last few drafts, even with some of the disappointments in the evolution of some of these players, you saw the appeal and the talent of Luke Musgrave in 2023. With the down year and the inconsistencies, you saw the appeal and the talent of Dontavian Wicks in 2023. You saw Zach Tom become a star tackle. Rasheed Walker develop into a terrific starting left tackle. The growth of Tucker Kraft. Just in the last few years, Edgerrin Cooper is a superstar in the making. Evan Williams, high quality starter right now, has a chance to be really, really good. Carrington Valentine, late on day 3. A starting caliber corner. You don't find starting caliber corners that late on day 3. It does not happen. It doesn't. And the Packers did it. If they draft him in the 3rd round and they quote unquote reach for him and he becomes a starting caliber player for them, are people happy? Is the 3rd round curse broken if they reach 5 rounds for a guy and he turns out to be a solid player? It's just silly to worry and fret about where the good players are coming from. And the reason I bring this up is because I look at this draft. Last draft, I had, I believe, 21 first round grades. But Peter, there are 32 picks in the first round. Yes, there are. By the time the Packers pick, it's possible they do not have a first round graded player left on their board. Now, generally speaking, every team has like 18 to, or even 15 in a draft to 22, 25 first round grades. Rarely, very rarely will a team actually have 30 or 32 first round grades. Like, that would be exceptionally rare. But because the variants are different, the boards are different, the scouting is different, the evaluations are different, the needs are different, the schemes are different. If you pick in the early 20s, you'll probably get a guy with a first round grade. We've heard the Packers pick at the end of the first round and say, look, we had a first round grade on this guy. You've heard the Packers pick in the 2nd round and say, hey, we had a first round grade on this guy. Or in the 3rd round, hey, we had a much higher grade. We had a Brian Gutekunst said they had Amari Rodgers and Josh Myers neck and neck, second round grade. That's why they traded up for Amari Rodgers. In retrospect, maybe something not to admit to. But I think it's just something that we need to keep in mind. This draft, there's 18, 20 first round players maybe. You hope one of them is there at 23. I think trading back is a very reasonable eventuality for the Packers, or maybe they look at this draft class. Maybe they look at this draft class and say, well, if we don't love this class and we don't think we're going to get a first round player at 23, why don't we see what this first round pick can go out and get us? It would be out of character. They haven't done something like that. Doesn't mean they won't. But I love day 2, just like I loved day 2 last year. And guess what? The Packers came out of day 2 with some really good football players. We haven't even seen Marshawn Lloyd. And their day 2, to me, is an unmitigated success because I think Javon Bullard is going to be a really good player. Edgerrin Cooper already a really good player. I think Marshawn Lloyd, it's possible they got the best running back in the draft. And we'll see what Tyron Hopper. But even with that, still had a really good second day. I think they have a chance to do that again. Maybe you use that first round pick to go get somebody. I don't know who that somebody could be, but maybe that's something that they go out and they consider doing. Now, we're not gonna play that out until we get a little closer, until we have the combine. Maybe I hear some things at the combine. Maybe there's some information that I can share here. But we will do a mock draft Monday, and I like doing them live, so we're going to do them again. We're going to do it again in real time for me anyway. You'll be hearing it, of course, after it happened, but I will try and explain as best I can because that's always the question. I post it on the social medias, and people are like, well, who is available? And it's like, well, go listen to the podcast. So we'll do that next on Locked On Packers. All right, here we are. The Packers here at pick 23. A couple interesting names here. And I already know who I'm going to take, but I just want to talk you through it. So they have at 21 on the PFF board, that we're using the PFF simulator, Armand Membu from Missouri. Look, I wouldn't be surprised if he's someone that they liked and would take in this spot. Developmental player, but could be an offensive tackle of the future. I am hard-pressed to believe that they would do this. Zach Tom is playing at an elite level at right tackle. Rasheed Walker is playing more than good enough that I don't think that is like the best move, but I don't think it's crazy. Jack Sawyer is the next highest-rated player on the list. I don't know how he's going to test. I think that's going to be a big deal for him at 6'5", 260. I don't know if he's a full-time edge player in the NFL. Could the Packers, and I've flagged this before, I want to flag it again. They need a Sam linebacker. They play a lot of base. Could that be Tyron Hopper this year? They have some questions about Eric Wilson, Isaiah McDuffie. So just something to think about. I think probably day 2 is where you could see a linebacker come off the board again. It's not here. 2 other names I want to shout out here. Jahdae Barron is available at this point. Trey Amos is available at this point. Let's add Siobhan Revel. Corners. I'm not going to do it here, but they are available. What I'm going to do is take Kenneth Grant, the BJ Raji of this group. Now, I think, and I made this case last week, I think, that the Packers may want to just move Kenny Clark back to nose tackle and find their 3 tech of the future. The other thing that they may want to do is simply find the heir apparent. Just find the next guy. If you look at the pass rush numbers, Kenneth Grant on true dropbacks was actually one of the most productive pass rushers in the country last year. Again, 6'3", 340, and is apparently going to test off the charts. Reminds me a ton of BJ Raji in his ability to not only eat blocks, but affect the passer on early downs. This is one of those where I think the combine can affect free agency, where you look at some of these guys, all these defensive linemen, and you go, maybe they don't need to re-sign TJ Slayton. and you bring in someone like Kenneth Grant. You let Kenny Clark play the nose this year. Grant is someone who is going to, take some time, but I really, really like him as a player. And Ted Thompson, Brian Gutekunst, this was a Bill Parcellsism world theory. There's only so many guys in this world that big that move like that. This is starting to feel like a defensive tackle in the first round. Defensive lineman, I think, I feel pretty confident saying defensive lineman in the first round. I really like this pick here. Okay. Savion Williams available here, receiver from TCU, 6'5", 225, I think would be a nice fit in Green Bay. Is that where they want to go? Is that the direction? Is he going to test well enough? Is he productive enough? They generally like guys that have been a little bit more productive than that. Jared Ivey, the edge from Mississippi, is here. Someone who has played a lot of football, 6'6", 285, Senior Bowl guy. Derek Harmon is here. Defensive lineman, 6'5", 310. Jordan Birch is here. Oregon, 6'6", 295. Those Oregon guys, keep an eye. I'm telling you, keep an eye on those Oregon guys. If I want to come down the board a little bit here, Jalen Royals is available. Jaden Higgins just went off the board before I picked. AZ Thomas is available here. Is it crazy to double up on the defensive front? I frankly don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think there's some offensive linemen here too that I like. Cameron Williams, Donovan Jackson. I've taken Donovan Jackson before. I want to avoid doing that. I really like Jalen Royals, and I think he's going to be gone by the time we get to the third round. I think this is a really good defensive line class. I'm struggling. Can you hear me vamping? Can you hear me vamping? I think Jordan Birch is going to text. He's the guy who at 295 clocked in at almost 21 miles an hour at Oregon. It's not crazy production. Last year, though, 10 sacks. So you're not just going, oh, he's a physical freak, and he can play over the tackle, can play inside a little bit. Maybe this is their Eric Armstead type player, and then maybe they can get a pass rusher or pass catcher, with that third round pick or a corner. I think have I taken Trey Harris before? I think I've taken Trey Harris before. I don't think Nick Emenwari from South Carolina is actually going to be there when the Packers pick here. I've kind of painted myself into a corner, unfortunately, because of the way that the PFF board has fallen for me. I really wanted to take a receiver here. I really wanted to take a corner here if I could. And maybe I have talked enough about Noah Williams. I believe I've taken him in these drafts before. Is that what I want to do? Oh, this is hard. I don't love this draft for me. I'm going to be honest. This is great radio right now. This is awesome. You guys are like, I'm so glad I listened to this for 28 minutes, and here we are debating should I take Jared Wilson or Jordan Phillips. If you can tell me who Jared Wilson is, I'll give you a cookie. This is not my favorite thing here. Not my favorite thing at all. All right, forget it. Trey Harris is the pick here. I know I've already done it, but I think he's a really productive player. I think if he's there at 80, I don't think he's going to be there at pick 87, frankly. It was kind of one of the reasons why they didn't want to do it, but it was too good an opportunity. I think he's a really good player. I think he's going to test the way that the Packers would want him to test. He's been one of the most productive players. I think he is wildly underrated. If the Packers take him at 55, I won't be surprised. If he goes in the first round after testing well, I won't be surprised about that either. So thank you for bearing with me as I struggled with that third round pick. Look, I'm Brian Gutekunst. He's just like me for real, because I was agonizing over that very fake third round pick, and he's got to make the real ones. We're back tomorrow. Coming this week, I had a conversation at the Super Bowl with a guy whose name you may know. His name is Adam Rank, and he likes the Bears. We talked for like 25 minutes. And you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. Maybe you feel both ways. That's coming up this week. Follow me on all the social medias, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on all the social medias, and go subscribe wherever you find podcasts. Subscribe on our YouTube page so you can stay locked on Packers.